0217 hours. The radar energy of the black waters of the Arabian Sea was bursting with the entry of the most modern warship of Iran, the Iris Sahand, a 400 Moj-class frigate armed with Chinese anti-ship missiles, which has deliberately entered the 12 nautical mile exclusion zone around the USS Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group. It was not a navigational mistake. This was not a misconception. At precisely 0214 hours, the Sahand had sent an uncoded message in international maritime frequencies. American warship, you are navigating in the waters of the Islamic Republic. Keep out or suffer the consequences. The Truman was silent as 67 officers on her bridge went silent. All radar operators, all weapons coordinators and all command staff knew what had just transpired. Iran had just threatened publicly in international waters an aircraft carrier of the United States, and diplomatic protest would be no answer. The Iris Sahand was the closest Iranian naval engineering has given to a modern surface combatant, which was specifically created to face the U.S. dominance in the region. The Sahand equipped with Chinese C-802 Nor anti-ship cruise missiles, Russian Tor M1 air defense systems, a 76mm naval gun provided Iran with the message that they can also build warships that can challenge Western technology head-to-head. The Naval Command of Tehran had been training 18 months to this very point, a calculated provocation to test the American will, to assert Iranian sovereignty and to send a message to allied countries that the Islamic Republic was not to be intimidated by carrier battle groups plying the waters they thought of as their strategic backyard. The violation was deliberate, and this is what made this confrontation unprecedented. The Sahand had not sailed into the exclusion area because of mechanical breakdown or bad seamanship. The Iranian naval officers had worked out a direct intercept course, had gone to increased speed at 24 knots, and had switched on their fire control radars in a series of predetermined signals which were undoubtedly a signal of hostile intentions. This was red line crossed slow motion, on open frequencies, with the intent of compelling the Americans to respond, and the cameras of the state television of Iranian broadcasting on shore observation stations recording images to be used as domestic propaganda. The calculation on the Tehran end appeared simple. Either the Americans would blink, demonstrating that carrier strike groups could be intimidated by aggressively enough powerful regional actors, or they would overreact with excessive force, giving Iran a propaganda win and possibly a justification to retaliate wider. It was a well-designed trap, which nearly 40 years of experience of rules of engagement in the American context, political sensibilities and historical hesitation to convert a maritime conflict into a shooting war had all contributed to designing the trap. The strategic planning of Iran had a fatal fault though. They were estimating on the American behavior of 2015. The regulations were different and no one had taken the trouble of notifying Tehran. 0219 hours. The USS Harry S. Truman did not shudder. The $13 billion nuclear-powered supercarrier had been able to continue its steady 15-knot course and continued its flight operations. Catapults fired F/A-18E Super Hornets in regular cycles. The air wing of the carrier engaged in drills as though a war vessel was not coming in to within firing range. This was no bravado. This was reckoning intimidation. The commander of the Truman was sending out one thing: your most modern warship is not rated to the exchange of course. However, at the L1 level, things were very different, as the carrier strike group had become a coordinated killing machine at digital velocity. 8,000 yards before the carrier, the Arleigh Burke-type destroyer USS Laboon already had fire control solution on the Sahand when the Iranian frigate gave the threatening signal. The AN/SPY-1D radar of the Laboon, a phased array radar which could track more than 100 objects at a time, had been tracking the Sahand since it left Bandar Abbas 14 hours ago. All the rivets, all the antennas, all the weapons of that Iranian warship were registered, examined and allotted to be destroyed. The Aegis combat system of the Laboon had automatically been putting the Sahand in the priority of hostile contacts as soon as its fire control radar reached the operational stage. Hot standby was SM-6 missiles that were vertical launch cells and were equipped with SM-6 missiles that were $3 million and had a range of 240 nautical miles and a Mach 3.5 speed. The crew of the destroyer did not have to wait to get the higher command to grant them permission. Regulations of approach were perfectly clear. Any hostile warship within the exclusion zone which displayed fire control radar activity was approaching a critical threat. The need to conduct business was pre-authorized. It has been only the fact that there was a decision in the final command 8,000 miles away in a secure Pentagon conference room that the Sahand would not become an artificial reef. 0221 hours. The gambit of the Iranians reached the point of the greatest danger. The Sahand switched on its targeting radar to fire the C-802 Noor anti-ship missiles, Chinese adapted sea skimmers with a range of 120 kilometers and a 165-kilogram warhead. In the terms of contemporary naval war, this was tantamount to loading a round and firing it straight into their chest. The electromagnetic signal screamed aggression. The Truman was now actively being trailed by the Sahand fire control system. Firing solutions computed and the launch sequences prepared. This was referred to by Iranian naval doctrine as coercive signaling, which is illustrated as the display of weapon capability without firing, producing maximum political pressure without theoretical deniability. But here the American doctrine was interpolated differently. Weapons lock means imminent attack. It was not a semantic difference. It was the dissimilarity between a battle and a burial. It was the answer of a very unlikely medium. The launching of missiles by the Laboon was replaced by the airborne E-2D Advanced Hawkeye of the USS Harry S. Truman, which was flying at the altitude of 25,000 feet, 50 miles out of the combat zone, gaining control of the situation. This was a radar platform which was not a regular airborne early warning aircraft costing $176 million. It was a flying quarterback who could organize all offensive and defensive resources. He could coordinate and integrate the data of satellites, destroyers, submarines and fighter planes into one rational tactical overview. On a distance of 300 miles, the Hawkeye crew sent a laser-guided package of data to 4 F/A-18E Super Hornets which were on routine training exercises 40 miles southwest of the carrier. In 12 seconds, the 4 planes turned around and headed to the Sahand, reaching 550 knots and equipping AGM-84 anti-ship missiles of Harpoon on their radar displays as the American air traffic was monitored. The Iranians could clearly view the 4 fast-moving contacts get on the radar screen and convert direction, abruptly moving on an intercept course. Expected time of weapons range, 3 minutes 20 seconds. 0223 hours. The bridge of the Iranian war vessel sunk into a frenzy that was scarcely controlled. Their radar warning sets were screeching with several target marks, not only in the Laboon, but now 4 incoming fighters' planes with their anti-ship missiles, which could reduce their frigate before they could make a firing solution on the carrier. The strategic algebra had gone the wrong way up. They were going to attack the carrier with the presumption of immunity, which they thought American rules of engagement would not allow them to retaliate at once. Rather, they were no more the threatened party, but were soon to be destroyed by a variety of vectors. The commander of the Sahand was presented with an inescapable dilemma with a 180-second time limit. Alternative 1. Launch their C-802 missiles at the Truman, winning a propaganda battle and perhaps destroying an American carrier, but ensuring the total destruction of their ship and the probable death of all 140 crewmen. Alternative 2. Continue the threatening pose and hope that the Americans had been bluffing, which would lead to destruction in case they were not. Alternative 3. Retreat on record. Announce their surrender on the same broadcasting channels where they had made threats, and retreat to port in contravention. They were decided upon. At 0224 hours, the USS Laboon gave an uncoded warning on both marine emergency frequencies. Iranian Warship Sahand, you are locked by fire control radar of several platforms. Switch off target systems and change course as you will be engaged. You have 60 seconds to comply. It was cold, procedural, and completely genuine transmission. Diplomatic language was absent, and there was no probability of misinterpretation. This was the last warning that was being sent off by a weapons system that had already determined the exact path through which it would sink their ship. The events that followed would be learned in the next 10 years in the naval academies. The Iranian frigate did not merely obey, it surrendered with a rapidity which gave the impression of utter terror. The fire control radar of the Sahand went off in 15 seconds. The reverse turn of the warship was so forceful that those who were not fastened to stations were struck against bulkheads. The speed of the frigate had increased to full possible power, which was about 30 knots, as it escaped out of the exclusion zone on a direct reciprocal heading back into Iranian territorial seas. This transmission, which threatened 10 minutes, was preceded by complete radio silence. 0226 hours. The reaction of America did not stop with the retreat of the Sahand. The F/A-18E Super Hornets did not resume normal patrol. They trailed the Iranian warship 15,000 feet, with weapons locked, and not a second of the humiliating retreat of the frigate was unregistered by multispectral targeting pods capable of reading numbers stamped on the hulls at 20 miles range. This video would be kept secret, examined and stored away, but some videos would be leaked to intelligence sharing networks so those allied navies could see what happens firsthand when you threaten American carrier strike groups. However, the most devastating reply was occurring on the electromagnetic spectrum, which could not be seen by human eyes. Yet, it was devastating to the Iranian operational security. As soon as the Sahand switched on its fire control radar, it had given an American electronic warfare capability a full diagnostic signature of the latest target technology of Iran. The EP-3E Ares II signals intelligence planes flying 80 miles away had recorded all the frequencies, all pulse repetition rates, all modulation peculiarities of the Iranian radar system. Such information was of gold-grade intelligence. It was the ability to jam, spoof or deceive that specific radar system with surgical accuracy where American electronic warfare suites were concerned. Any future encounter with an Iranian warship that employed that fire control equipment would be nullified before the first bullet was called. The Sahand had not simply withdrawn, but had given freely the U.S. Navy a key to the defeat of the whole surface fleet of Iran. The brainpower of 120 seconds of radar pulse was even greater than the ship. 0234 hours. The USS Laboon took one last step that turned a strategic humiliation into a tactic victory. The destroyer turned the switch of its SPY-1D radar to the full power position and gave the fleeing Sahand a full-powered electromagnetic scan, a maneuver known as a radar painting, which is no longer a tactical move, but an uncompromising psychological one. The radar warning receivers of the Iranian crew would have been screaming and clattering with full volume, all the warning bells ringing as much as possible that they were under the pursuit of fire control devices. The Americans were protesting that even in retreat, even in full speed, even on the way to the security of the territorial waters, the Sahand was a marked object which could be destroyed anyhow at the pleasure of the Americans. The analysis of cost of this 8 minutes confrontation was nearly ludicrous in its asymmetry. Iran had already invested its most competent surface combatant $400 million of warship in one of the years of construction and training. A strategic antagonism, aimed at confronting the American supremacy and enhancing internal propaganda, had been worked out by them. The real-world outcome: no tactical benefit, total strategic embarrassment, severe intelligence failure, and 140 men in the Navy that would now be experiencing the rest of their naval service as a reminder of the time they ran away with like animals being hunted by their killer. The F/A-18 intercept, zero ammunition, and the United States spent about $180,000 in aviation fuel and got a multi-million-dollar intelligence windfall and sent a strong deterrence message to all the regional powers keeping watch to the confrontation. The Harry S. Truman did not take the wrong path. There was no flight operation that was delayed. The operation pace of the carrier strike group was not even wavering. 0247 hours. The Iranian state television, who had set up their cameras to record their warship standing up against American aggression, instead aired massively edited videos of the Sahand returning to its patrol mission in completion with no reference of the hysterical retreat. Yet the full story was in maritime tracking information accessible to all maritime powers of the planet. The Sahand had come close enough to within 8 nautical miles of the Truman, turned on weapons systems, threatened, and then fled at top speed on the reality of actual consequences. The message of the region was based on absolute clarity. The Naval Command of Saudi Arabia noted that American carrier exclusion zones were strictly applied without any procrastination. The United Arab Emirates observed that menacing messages that yielded instant weapons lock as opposed to diplomatic complaints. The engagement, which was documented by the 5th Fleet Headquarters of the Republic of Bahrain as a textbook case of an escalation dominance. The capacity to manipulate the confrontation dynamics to such an extent that the enemies do not need to fire their weapons to lose the battle. To the Naval Command of Iran, the consequences of the loss were devastating on top of the humiliation. The Sahand commanding officer lost his command in 72 hours, not because of falling back, but because of establishing a condition in which the only way of escape that could have caused the nation no disaster was the one of retreat. The IRGC naval forces came up with new standing orders and orders that made it illegal to approach the American carrier groups even at 25 nautical miles without prior authorization by the supreme leadership in Tehran. The red line that Iran had attempted to cross became a red line that they could not dare to cross. 0312 hours. The intelligence exploitation was only starting, yet the engagement was formally over. NSA cryptologists and Navy intelligence experts already were processing the electronic warfare information gleaned out of the radar systems of the Sahand. New jamming profiles would be communicated to all the American warships in the Middle East within 6 hours. Those profiles would be disclosed to the Allied navies within 2 weeks as a result of intelligence sharing agreements. The fire control system of the Sahand, the most tightly held Iranian naval technology, was digitally sliced and virtually rendered useless in an 8 minutes battle. This larger influence was felt throughout the naval policy of Iran. Their plan to counter the American carrier battle groups with modern surface combatants, antagonize them in the local waters, had been put through the stress test and proved disastrously ineffective. Technological superiority was not determined in terms of capability. Iranian missiles have the potential to destroy American vessels. The difference was quantified by integration, speed and sensory-to-shooter coordination in overwhelming numbers. Iran could build warships. They were unable to construct the network-centric warfare ecosystem in which individual platforms were turned into coordinated killing machines, operating at machine speed. Psychological was the worst lesson to Tehran. They had put their chief warship and seasoned officers, new armaments, and a well-laid scheme in it, and got nothing but to prove their own helplessness. The knowledge that American carrier groups do not negotiate, do not back down, and do not hesitate when red lines are crossed would haunt future confrontations. The Sahand would be reenacted in any Iranian deckhand book of naval briefs, a constant reminder of the fact that confronting American naval might is the only sure result. Humiliation. 0341 hours. The USS Harry S. Truman kept on her track of patrol in the Arabian Sea, and her air wing was carrying out routine drills. This morning incident was already slipping into the monotonous memory of the 5,000 sailors in the carrier and her escorts. The following day, another local force, which is receiving a similar lesson as is taught again and again in these waters. Carrier strike groups are not targets of opportunity. They are virtual fences of exclusion that are supported by the entire range of American military force. The Persian Gulf was on the edge, and yet no international crisis came up. Only one withdrawing frigate, one relieved commanding officer, and 140 Iranian sailors who would spend the rest of their lives apologizing how their successful patrol mission necessitated their escaping at maximum speed by American fighters. The propaganda film did not see the light of day. The strategic victory did not take place. The crossed red line was now a warning on the distinction between posing and strength. Do you feel that the American carriers are beyond reproach? Comment Truman in case you believe that exclusion zones cannot be negotiated. The fighters are armed, the radars are painting, and rules are simple. Don't cross the line. Your assistance introduces even more untold accounts of the modern military actions. Send emails to keep up with the true story behind the headlines. The fleet is prepared. The operation goes on, and we shall meet on the next excursion.